So hello, welcome to the business platform. On today's program, on this program, you know that our aim is to help you, who are the owner of a small, medium-sized business, figure out what's going on right now, right? Figure out how to make sense of the business world, how to take advantage of the opportunities, and how to avoid some of the traps that are opening up in a world that is hopefully soon to be post-pandemic. We're talking about simple attitudes, behaviors, tools that can help you make a difference in running your business. And as always, we scour the world for people who can give you the best information. And our guest today is no exception. Paul McCarthy, who's the CEO of a small business, amongst many, many other things, is here, and he's got such a wonderful background in terms of consulting, in terms of helping organizations figure out how to make changes, what sort of leadership makes a difference, and he's got a wealth of experience to share with us. So, Paul, first of all, thank you ever so much for joining us. Take a couple of minutes and just introduce yourself to the audience in terms of who you are and the kind of work that you do.
Thanks, George. Appreciate it. And it's good to be here. I've got about 25 years experience really working in businesses, small businesses, medium, as well as enterprise scale organizations. And I've been a consultant that's gone in to help organizations as they've expanded, looked at growth trajectories, as they've redesigned their organizational structures. I've looked at their leadership teams and what types of leaders they need to have in place to grow the business. I've helped organizations through, wide scale transformation, and that was ranged from all sorts of businesses, from smaller construction type businesses to finance and public sector organizations, as well as health organizations. And I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs as well in this space. So kind of been around a little bit and worked globally and got a bit more of an appreciation than the average consultant for the different types of businesses, what works, what doesn't work, and how to make things practical and accessible, as opposed to just going in there and providing a bunch of suggestions that stay in a report on a shelf. And so I'm really excited to have this conversation and share some experiences and tips if I can.
Great, thank you. And one of the things, I love many things about doing this program, but one of the many things I love about doing this program is that it's always truly global. I mean, I'm Scottish. I've lived in Brazil for the last 23 years. You're English. You live in Canada. We both have global practices. Let's start with a kind of global vision. The world's still in the middle of this pandemic, but all the changes are happening all over the world and every single business. What are you seeing in terms of what's the state of business right now globally?
Yeah, great question. I think it's a question that's on everybody's mind, really, George. I think we're in this kind of fight or flight and freeze mode, and particularly I'm seeing organizations that they're really uncertain of the way forward, because the playbook that we had has been ripped up. There is no playbook for the disruption and the organizational transformation that our enterprises are going through right now and will continue to. I mean, you talked earlier about we're still in pandemic, but actually I think this is just going to become the way that we work. And so we've seen it from all types of angle. For instance, remote working. 25 years ago, I was working in organizations where if you weren't in front of someone, then you weren't doing your work, and there was a trust issue, and you weren't as productive as you could be if you were in someone's office or on the factory floor. Now it's a common denominator for any organization because of COVID, that remote working is the way we need to be. How are organizations responding to that? Well, again, they're fight, flight, or freeze. Some of them are adopting it quite well. Some of them have had some challenges. But what we're seeing is through enforced change and disruption come opportunities. And actually, I would argue from some of the research that we've seen that remote working has actually increased productivity. So that's just one example of what businesses are grappling with as well at this time. Other things businesses are grappling with, I think it's a global commonality, is how to diversify what they offer. Products and services, and the way that we deliver those have changed as well. We've seen a massive ramp up in online businesses and the procurement of products and services through those means. And we've seen a radical change in service-based businesses that deal with customers face to face. And organizations are in the midst of having to resize, rescope, and recalibrate and really look at their workforce structures differently and determine whether they need certain types of staff, volumes of staff. And this is something that's happening daily, and it's changing daily as well, depending on which jurisdiction you live in and how COVID is impacting your what you can and cannot do as an organization. So yeah, businesses are sharing some of the pain globally, the same type of pain globally. They might have different narratives and individual nuances for their particular jurisdiction, but these are some of the big things that are happening that every organization around the world needs to face at some point.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an option right now, is it? I mean,
no.
Do I change or don't I change? You and I are old enough to remember, back in the 80s and 90s, it's like, oh yeah, change. It's one of those kind of abstract concepts that, yes, maybe it's a good thing, or maybe we don't need to do it. That's not an option these days. I mean, you change or die. I mean, that's the way. I mean, I was talking with a lady who is head of global talent at Renault. She's a Brazilian who lives in Paris, and she was saying that what they're seeing is 10 years worth of innovation in a year. This was last year, right? And it's the same for this year, and it'll be the same next year. Which means that if you're not doing that, by the end of 2022, you'll be 30 years behind the people who have been doing it, which is wild when you think about it. Are you seeing the same kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I was on a Clubhouse session the other day, and Clubhouse, for those who aren't aware of it, is this audio platform similar to LinkedIn, but real-time audio dialogue. So you go into various Clubhouse rooms and have a conversation, join as a speaker or as a listener, and it's really actually taking off as a technological innovation. It's different than everything out there, and obviously the big boys are trying to replicate it as we speak. But I was on one of those sessions, and someone said something really interesting about COVID, which I know it's tragic. It's affected us directly, indirectly, and will continue to do so. But they said, in the context of what you just said, George, that COVID has been an accelerator for our organization's need and ability to disrupt and to be continuing to innovate. So COVID has kind of almost shrunk the time that we have typically taken to be innovative. And you just said it like yourself, like, the 20, 30 years in 1 year. Essentially, COVID has provided that platform. Now, as challenging, as tragic as I mentioned it is, what opportunities does it present? And I think it presents an amazing opportunity for us to relook at our businesses and to throw the whole adage of, change and transformation as, we'd say it's the constant, it's the new norm, it's how we do things, or, we could stick our heads in the sand and ignore it. I just think it's a fact of the way we run businesses now. We have to be open to changes at rapid scale. And if we don't, quite frankly, our market share is going to implode. Yeah. And so I think organizations that are going to come through this, as well as other pandemics and other disruptive forces, are the ones that are constantly being able to pivot. Yeah. I'm sick and tired of that word agile, because I hear it all the time. And I'm sure small business owners listening to this, watching this, are going to roll their eyes when they hear that word. Great, because I agree with you. I think it's about, how do we stay on top of coming, just 1-2 steps ahead. That's all we need to do, and pivot when we need to. But yeah, seeing definitely an increase in innovation at a more rapid speed than ever before.
Yeah, and which brings me, that's a nice segue to the next topic, which you and I are massively passionate about, which is leadership, or in most organizations, the lack of leadership. Because, all right, we need to innovate, we need to change, we need to be agile, we need this, we need that, we need the next thing. Then you go out and get people, or you have people in your organization who do that. And how do most organizations treat them? I don't want to steal your thunder, but you've written a whole book about this. What happens in organizations to people who want to disrupt, who want to innovate, who want to make things happen, who want to change, who want to pivot? How do organizations treat them?
Oh, George, you're lining this up for me almost, because this is, essentially what we do with with talent in organizations that want to do things differently and want to disrupt and be rebellious. We fire them. We get rid of them. We demote them. We sideline them. We discredit them. And I'm not here necessarily just to talk about that, but that's a big part of what I do in fired leadership, of course. But what it does suggest is that there's a tidal wave, there's a tidal shift coming, which is saying, from all the research I've done of organizations and peer-reviewed research sources, we are actually in the future going to need disruptive talent, disruptive leaders, as a way to help us through ongoing disruption. Yeah. So think about it. Your organization right now, whoever's listening, you might get that really annoying person who's always coming up with new ideas, but it's halting production line, it's halting supply chain, getting ready, blah, blah, blah. It's impacting your business right now. But those people that are the leaders and the frontline staff, or the managers who are that annoying mosquito that just won't go away, they're the ones that are bringing fresh thinking, new innovative ideas to your organization. They're the ones we need to be listening to, because they're the ones that are going to help your organization be different in the future. And currently, it's quite a sad reality that we're not preparing our leaders or any other organizational talent for embracing such disruptive, rebellious qualities. And in the future, our leadership development of those individuals is going to require a different approach. So those organizations that get ahead of the curve now will be the ones that benefit, I think. And the research is starting to corroborate that. Just think about this, George. 2/3 of the organizations that we require for future economic growth have not yet been discovered. They haven't been created, right? Which means the leaders of those organizations haven't yet been identified. So 2/3 of our future economic growth globally is going to need organizations that haven't been created yet, with leaders that haven't been identified, probably haven't even been born yet. So what are we doing to prepare for that? And then you throw COVID into the mix, and we've still got to deliver, time to deliver, pressure, all that never goes away. But those organizations that take the time right now to think about the future are going to benefit considerably.
Mm-hmm. So, and I wholeheartedly agree with that, right? But let's look at the other side as well, which is, you're someone who's spent 10, 15, 20 years building up your business. You've got maybe 25, 50, 100 employees. You've got a small factory, or you've got a technology company, or you've got an accounting firm, or whatever. You put your heart and soul into it. You realize that things are going to change, but you're terrified that your life's work is going to crumble around you. How do you help navigate through that? How do we hold people's hand and bring them through that journey so that they don't lose what they build up, but they also don't lose because they don't change?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, George. I think people have got to be receptive. You've got to have the appetite. So people have got to be open to the conversations that are uncomfortable. Many people listening to this, and many of the clients I've served have been kind of mum and pop type businesses, smaller scale. Some of them are scared about succession planning. Some of them are scared that they won't be able to hand over the reins to suitably qualified talent. Some of them, quite frankly, are too controlling of the business. But in terms of people that are out there like that now, there's very simple things we can do to engage people in your organization. Like just taking some time, for instance, to to really walk around the shop floor, walk around the factory, walk around the office and ask people what they think. I did something with a client years ago where we created these town hall sessions, and we call them like Ask Me Anything sessions. And that's a really great way of engaging staff and doing it in real time to really walk. You'd be surprised, stuff like that can actually yield such creativity and collaboration. And all of a sudden you've got people coming out of the woodwork giving you ideas on how you can stay ahead of the competition. And guess what? If you're someone that's scared of that, that's fine, because most leaders I've seen, the most control or owner operated businesses, are scared of relinquishing some of that control. But give people the autonomy to try new things, and that doesn't cost anything. Actually, you don't have to go on any fancy programs or courses. You don't be anything in one of these sessions. If we think it's a great idea as a company, then you go away and do that piece of work. Like, that is very empowering, and it's very effective, and it's also, but it's based on the assumption that are open to those types of dialogue, and that comes from being aware of your leadership style and self-reflective, which we have to do on an individual basis.
Yeah, and I would argue as well that number one, control is an illusion, as we all know, right? But maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago, you could have this owner operator who had a vision, and this is my vision for the company, and I could kind of drive people through that vision. The world is so complex these days that it's not going to work. No one person has all the answers, and no one person can have all the vision. And my argument is always make it a shared vision. It doesn't remove your vision as owner, right? It just happens to include bits of other people's vision. And once you make it a shared vision, then people will work for it, and people will want to make it happen, and they'll care about it. And would it be your vision purely? No. But at the end of the day, if you've got 10, 15, 25, 50 people working for you, you need them to deliver. So how can it be just your vision? I mean, you need them to buy into it. So why wouldn't you let them buy into the vision, and then the rest will follow? Yeah,
I mean, the command and control approach to leadership is dying. Right?
Thankfully.
Thankfully, all the research tells us that all the results, the effectiveness of a command and control approach does not correlate to your bottom line. For instance, you talk about shared vision. I think that's really important for the future and how we engage talent. It doesn't matter what business you are, whether you've got a factory or you're a mechanic or an accountant. If you don't engage your staff, you will lose them. And I can tell you right now, George, that the cost of turnover in an organization, like at a certain level, let's say you're a leader in an organization, if you leave voluntarily or involuntarily, and let's say you leave because you don't share the vision, or you're not allowed to be part of developing that vision, that will cost your organization in direct costs between 213 and 400% of that individual's base salary to replace them. That doesn't include non-financial direct or indirect costs. Just one person. So think about this. It's in your business interests to actually encourage collaboration and shared vision. So Netflix did a great example of this. Now, your business owner listening to this might not be a Netflix in size or scale, but they did something so profoundly simple, George, which was they opened a Google Drive document, and the CEO, Reed Hastings, encouraged every single employee of no matter what level they were to, if they had an idea, to contribute to the vision or question the vision or shift it in a different direction, to add their comments to the Google document. It's an open source document. No one edits it. It's actually, everyone can see it. And you've got your frontline worker all the way up to your executive providing input. Now, why can't some of your listeners and your readers and viewers do something like that in their organization? Very easy. cheap. It doesn't cost you anything, for instance.
Yeah.
And then when you have your frontline management meetings or your leadership meetings, do a weekly roundup of all the ideas in that document. And if one or two of them spark an interest, as you evolve your vision, take that on and incorporate it into the vision. Like, it's that simple. And again, no fancy, expensive consultants required. Just you having the appetite as a business owner to open up your doors, so to speak, and provide that opportunity and platform.
Yeah, and I was talking to an executive of one of the biggest education groups in Brazil yesterday for the Portuguese version of this program. And she's vice president of digital education at this big education group. And we were discussing exactly that, but with a slightly different shift, which we were talking about the importance of doing that with your customers, because your customers are now different, right? Their wants, their desires are different. And here's the rub. You don't know what they want, and they don't know currently what they want, right? So you have to help your customers figure out this journey, right? I mean, everybody's living in this COVID, post-COVID kind of world. And so the only thing you can know is that what your customers wanted from you in February of 2020 and what they want from you now is different. That's the only given. Everything else is an unknown, but the only way to discover it is to ask them and keep asking them and ask them again and never stop asking them. I mean, what are some of the things that you help clients do with, getting in touch with their customers and creating that connection?
Yeah, great question. Again, I think firstly, the thing to say here, my initial thoughts and experience, is that we tend to overcomplex this subject. Right? We tend to spend money and time on research to enter the market, and our demographics and what they want to buy. When really all we need to do is simplify this. And I'll give you an example. In the 1990s, British Airways, they were quite a prominent airline, and one of the things that they noticed is that they were getting a high volume of complaints, and they had developed a customer service manual, and all of their call center staff adhered to answering questions using this manual, and they found that it wasn't working. It wasn't actually helping the organization to resolve customer complaints or to figure out what customers needed. So what they did is they took the bold move. Remember, this is the 1990s, and they were a leading player at the time in the airline industry. They took the bold step to throw out their customer service manuals, and they allowed, in fact, they encouraged and expected that their customer service staff on the phone would actually engage. Guess what? This is going to revolutionize everyone listening to this. Re-engage in a conversation. That's it. A simple conversation that you and I are having now, where I ask you a question, you tell me your answer. I use that to create another segue to another question. And they found, guess what they found? By doing that, by throwing out the manual, and enabling people themselves to be accountable for their role and what they delivered and not have to be told, they reduce complaints significantly faster and more volume than any other time they'd use these manuals. I put that in my book that I'm writing about and the future of leadership, as well as a case study. But as in terms of relating it to this topical conversation we're having now, why are organizations not doing that? Just go out and ask your top 10 customers, what do we do well? What can we do better? What do you want from us? What do you not want from us? And then guess what? Do the same with the 10 customers that you have that don't really like your services. So you get a full spectrum, and just have everyday conversations. And I find in my work that we're reverting, which is a good thing, to having everyday conversations, simple conversations that matter. And once we can have a conversation that matters, we can then understand someone else's needs and requirements. And you know as well as I do, George, like the world of sales, people can smell a mile away someone who's trying to sell you something. Scrap that, throw it out the window, like get rid of that philosophy. And that starts with culture, which starts with the leadership, which means you have to role model these behaviors and just do it yourself. Go out and talk to people around your business, just everyday conversations. Say what I call say what you see moments. Just go and like, George, you're old enough to remember catchphrase and Roy Walker. In the UK, where they would kind of do this catchphrase. It would be a screen that would take a little square away, and it would be like a minute you had to solve this catchphrase. And the concept was just say what you see. When something gets taken away, what are you seeing? In the same context, say what you see with your customers, say what you see with your staff, allow them to say what they see of you, and you're creating much more of an open, honest, purpose-driven culture. So that ironically helps you to better understand what your customers and your staff need.
Yeah.
And again, doesn't cost anything. Doesn't cost anything.
Exactly. And, again, other things that don't cost anything, it's sometimes, we use these words like competencies and stuff like that, which scare people away. But when you look at the attitudes and the behaviors that are necessary to be a successful leader in today's business environment, what are your starting points? What are the top 3 or 4 things that you need to have in place?
Yeah, this is also another interesting chasm of opportunity for discussion, because I think we overcomplex what leaders need in terms of skills, competencies, attributes, characteristics. There's a program, like if you did a Google search for leadership development programs, millions of hits would come through. Right? No wonder someone in a small or medium-sized business and an enterprise scale business is so confused with the choice out there. One works, one doesn't work. This is better than this one. And that's partly why I developed, one of the ventures that I'm working on now, which is Fired Leadership, which essentially I've distilled the 5 qualities that I believe the future need to be different, go through transformation and handle disruption. My 5 ideas, by the way, they've been kind of road tested and assessed against the leading competency models and frameworks out there and the development programs for leaders. And what I'm finding is that these 5 qualities are not taught or provided as part of leadership development for leaders. And in fact, they're not actually encouraged when you display these in your day-to-day job. So what are they? Fresh thinking, the ability to think differently and act differently. Right. So again, throughout the rule book, there are no hierarchies here. Everybody has the ability to think differently and act differently if they're allowed to. That's fresh thinking. That results in innovation. Inquisitive nature is the I. This is about curiosity. This is about kind of always asking why, questioning and re-questioning, and doing so from a position of wanting to evolve and move forward the organization. The R is real and accountable. We've talked a lot offline, as well as we've seen so much research that leaders today are just not real. They wear masks. They show up to be a leader in the office differently than they do as a human outside the office. Well, let's stop that. Let's actually become whole brain leaders, real and accountable for being real, which means you have lunch, like the founder of Patagonia. He's notoriously known for having lunch with his staff. Now he doesn't need to, but he goes into the canteen and has lunch with his staff. It's not a gimmick, it's not a ploy, it's not a PR stunt. He likes the people that work with him, and he wants to find out about them as a human. So he's real and he's accountable for being real. Expressive and challenging is the E in the Fired framework. That's about questioning again and challenging the way we've always done things. Those types of people are typically seen as disruptors, and that mosquito I mentioned earlier. Yeah. But they're the ones that ask the difficult questions and unearth the things that we don't see. And then the D is direct and transparent. Every organization that I've researched, every research paper I've reviewed, always starts or ends with the premise, it's a shame that we have to accept organizational politics, but we have such disdain for it. Well, the D in the direct and transparent is a way of saying, we don't have to actually play the political game. Let's say what we mean and mean what we say. And so being direct in an organization, ironically, saves your organization millions. I think we have 22 million meetings on average per year in North America. 50% of those meetings don't need to happen because people are not direct and to the point. So they labor the point, and that takes time, takes people's time, money. Your shop floor stops running, whatever it is your business is in. But we don't need half of those meetings. So put in place the direct and transparent. I guess what I'm saying is all these qualities combined are what I consider what future leaders need. And again, no fancy gimmicks, programs, or anything like that. These are qualities that every human has, but we are not encouraged to have these when we're leaders, which I find just completely ironic and mind-blowing.
Yeah, and I think my experience is part of that is because it's difficult. I mean, looking inside yourself and being honest and being open and having those conversations is actually harder than hiding behind a methodology or a spreadsheet or a tendencies. You know, oh, we have this new thing is, you know, let's do this new thing. It's easier to hide behind this new thing than it is to look inside yourself and saying, am I being direct and honest? Am I being transparent? Am I being accountable? And you know, which is nuts because, as you said, it's the only thing that works, right? It's people that will make your business work or people that will break your business. Mm-hmm. So you need to be an expert in people, and that starts with being an expert on yourself, right? But I find that in the majority of leaders, they like to be busy rather than being productive, right? And they like to do the busy work as opposed to the hard work, which is looking into yourself. But the hard work is the stuff that pays off. And, you know, is your experience the same?
Yeah, I'm just, you know, looking at the picture behind you. We've talked about that before. Miles Davis, right? Arguably one of the best jazz musicians ever in the world, and yet was very, very much a challenging individual. I know we spoke another time about his documentary on Netflix, but very challenging. But he stood for something. He stood for revolutionizing the way that particular genre of music was developed. My point of all that is, yeah, you can go on all these fancy courses and programs and hide behind these methodologies and frameworks, but unless you stand for something, it doesn't matter what you're doing. No one will follow you, or if they do, they're only following you for a paycheck. Now, my point of all this is, it's really hard to do the self-reflection on your character. I've done it myself. I did it as part of the work that I'm doing with fire leadership, because I kept getting fired for having these 5 qualities. And I kept on wondering why. And I was like, well, it's my fault. It must be my fault, right? But yes, it was. I was the common denominator. But I also looked at the organization and the organizational structure as being complicit in not recognizing these qualities. In fact, dismissing these, even though I was hired through very lengthy and costly recruitment processes to demonstrate the qualities that I would ultimately be fired for. But it takes the only thing that you need to do in order to be open to that conversation about who you really are and what you stand for is what I've just said. Be open. It doesn't matter. We don't need the answer. We don't need to have it all figured out. But if we're open, that sends a message to the people that report to us. It also sends a message that we're authentic and genuine. And guess what? People follow because they're inspired by people that are open, right? I'm not going to respect you just because you've got a job title. In today's new world and the future, the currency of leadership is going to need leaders that are human-centered, heart-centered, and open to discussing their vulnerabilities, their foibles, right? Because far from that being a sign of weakness, it's now a sign of strength. It's always been a sign of strength, by the way, in my opinion, but it's a sign of strength, and it will ironically make people follow you, which basically then translates to the bottom line, because then people are more productive when they follow people that are genuine and authentic. They want to go the extra mile. And then guess what happens? You get better products out of your staff, which then satisfies your clients and then leads to repeat business and then referral business and then so the thing goes on. So and I've reviewed hundreds of them across the world as part of the work I'm doing. None of them teach you how to do what I've just said. Like that starts from you, and you have to know what you stand for. What is your purpose? And in fact, just before we go into the next conversation piece, Ernst & Young did a survey a few years ago. They talked about purpose, and 92% of leaders in that survey, I think it was 4,000 or 5,000, I'll have to check the number offline, but 92% of that survey said that they would leave the organization if their individual purpose did not align to the organization's purpose. So think about that. In the future, the currency for how a leader selects whether they work for your organization is going to be determined not just by a paycheck, not just by the fear of the title and the hierarchy, but by whether their purpose aligns to yours.
Yeah, I agree with that. The other thing,
big pill for some to swallow.
The other thing I would add to that is, what's the purpose of the organization? You know, and I spend a whole bunch of time asking this with business leaders, and that, well, we're here to make money. It's like, really? Why should I, as a customer, care about you making money? Why should I, as an employee, care about you making and I've got nothing against you making money. You can make all the money you want, but it has to be a consequence of you delivering value. And you need to deliver value to all your stakeholders. Do you deliver value to your customers? Do you deliver value to those who work with you? Do you deliver value to your suppliers, right? And your rivers of money that you want to make can be a consequence of that. But if you don't have a purpose for the organization, if you're not adding value to your stakeholders, what's the point of the organization?
Well, and that's another question. You know, we talked about how to understand what customers need. Part of that is understanding what they value. And so if you don't know what they value, then how can you ever serve them? And I agree with you, George. I think, you know, making money from a business or a venture is a byproduct. What are you really in business for? To provide something of value to make someone else's life better, whatever that is. You know, and really ultimately, whether you're selling widgets or you're selling ideas or you're selling accounting software, whatever it is, you're actually in the people business, because people consume those products and services. So if we don't care about people, people can see that and they will vote with their feet. I mean, you know, we've seen it in the history books. We've seen it with organizations that fall foul of ethical and moral principles. We've seen it when organizations put profit before people. You know, in this new wave that we're moving towards, we're reinventing our organizations. We're reinventing our structures. We're reinventing the way we do business. So, you know, Frederick Laloux, he talks about in his seminal work, Reinventing Organizations, talks about the rise of self-managing organizations. So flat organizational structures and leaderless organizations. So leaders don't have titles, right? Can you imagine, can any one of your listeners imagine that leaders one day will sit around a table and set their own salaries together? Can you imagine the culture that needs to be in place for that to happen? People say it will never happen. It's happening right now. I can show you organizations it's happening. But my point of that is these organizations and those of the future are going to be characterized by their sense of integrity, their sense of wholeness, and their sense of purpose. What purpose do they fulfill? And that will become, as I said earlier, the new currency. And so if we don't know why we're doing what we're doing, how can we ever build sustainable businesses where we have talent that wants to work with us and we can keep that talent? So this is absolutely vital. And we're overlooking it because people are, you know, rolling their eyes, or, you know, they're saying, oh, this is just another fad. It's just another phase. But actually, it's here to stay. And COVID, just as I mentioned earlier, it's accelerated it.
Sure, and it has to be that way. I mean, and I've been doing this 15 years. We did 15 years with Johnson & Johnson doing the high potential development programs. These are the vice president, worldwide vice presidents up to preparing them for C-suite jobs. And we use the action learning methodologies. So it's a team brought together to work on a real project. There's no hierarchy, right? Because they're all leaders. I mean, how are you going to say to 15 executives in a program, oh, one of you has to be the leader? We're developing you all to be C-suite leaders, right? So they learn that. And when you see them working, you have no idea who's, so if they're working with a sponsor, you have no idea who might be head of supply chain or who might be, just someone on the program, because they're all working together. And out of that comes that whole methodology of squads and pods and those agile teams that come together and disband, because that's the only way that business can be agile. I mean, to work, right? You can't structure business anymore, right? Because the structure is always going to be 18 months behind what the demand on the front line is. So what you need is to have people who are able to say, I know how I can contribute, right? I know when I need to step up. I know when I need to step back. I know what I do to add value. I know what I do to take value off the table. And if everybody knows all of that, then you can put the pieces together. It's like making a meal, right? If you get a Michelin star chef in a kitchen, right? Just tell me what the ingredients are, and I can make you 150 different dishes out of this, right? It's the same thing with an organization. If all the ingredients know their place, you can make any dish you want at any point.
And adding to that as well, I'm seeing a lot of organizations of different sizes institute what they call what if days. And the concept behind that is how can we make what we're doing better? And so when you were talking about the example with Johnson & Johnson, and nobody knew who the leader was, nobody knew what roles they played, they were all in it together, right? They clearly had a sense of purpose, but their values were also aligned.
Yes,
they clearly had similar values and understood their own value and the group value. What I found that works when you have groups like that is if you get them together for what if days, you're encouraging new ideas, right? So it's what I call the expressive and challenging quality of my FIRED framework, because I talk about it in my book and the work I do with leadership teams, is get them together to kind of like get and throw out all the rule books, make sure all your phones are off, not check email, just be in the moment, right? Again, you're all a group of people aligned by similar values, aligned by this purpose that you're working towards. And so when you get the power of brains like that in a room where they're encouraged to be expressive and challenging, and there are no rules, that is where we have seen significant disruption and innovation occur. It's amazing. Once you take away the rule book, people are actually allowed to flourish. And no worrying about the clock, or I'm speaking on top of this person, and I'm I might be saying something bad about my idea. If everybody's equal in this concept of a what if lab, then every idea is equal. It doesn't matter where the idea comes from. And so I found those things really, really effective tools for organizations that are stagnating and they're looking to how do they keep ahead of the competition. That does one of two things. It helps you keep your market share, but it also helps you keep your talent, and you keep your talent engaged. Again, more productive, better output, better productivity for everything all around. So this stuff is not going away.
Yeah. Well, and just for people who might be watching that, well, yeah, but I don't know how to do any of this stuff. It's all online, free. I mean, seriously, if you want to go in and get a framework for how to have a difficult conversation, it will take you less than 5 seconds on Google. If you want to know how to facilitate a meeting better, there are videos, it's all free, right? And it's not difficult to find. It's not hidden under a rock anywhere. The top 10 skills that you need to do what we're talking about, you can get within an hour on the internet.
Or and even something you don't even have to search the internet for, George. Like, let's say right now you're an organization out there, you've got 500 people, you might have a leadership team of 20, and you've got some challenges with that team. And there's some cracks in the system, but you don't know how to address it. Well, here's a simple way to address it. Put in place what you call, I mentioned it earlier on, name what you see, but this is what I call kind of remove the mask sessions, right? Just put into your Outlook calendar or whatever calendar you use, some time with your peer or your leadership team and get them all together and talk about things. Take your masks off, not your COVID mask, but the masks we all wear to work, right? That don't allow us to be human in the workplace. Take your mask off sessions, 15-minute sessions once a week, and guess what? Whatever you talk about and agree as a team that you might need to and want to focus on, you then take that and focus on it for the next week. That idea in itself, you don't need to look at on Google. You don't need to spend time figuring out how you're going to do it. You just start from an honest based conversation. Mm-hmm. And if you and I can talk honestly, that means that we can develop trust. And we can develop trust. That means I'm going to want to work with you and you're going to want to work with me. I think we're in danger of over-complexing these ideas and the solutions that we want to provide businesses, when really, again, COVID if it's taught us nothing, it's taught us that we can radically simplify how we do things like this. We can have difficult conversations in a very easy and respectful way. We don't need to follow some framework. We can just set the intention, and the intention to set having that conversation, that has broken down barriers in itself.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Like that actually very that I want to have a difficult conversation with you means I care about it enough to want to have the dialogue.
Yeah. Yeah.
So reintroducing our sense of being human into the workplace.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because, people always come back to me with the same thing, which is I don't have time. We don't have time. It's like, well, hold on a second. Let's think about this. If you really have no time, then you're doing everything wrong, right? Because if you're filling up 23 and a half hours and it's getting you these horrible results that have brought you to this situation, you're better off stopping anyway, right? Because it's not working. So stop. I mean, it's also not true, because I can walk into any organization on the planet, and I've walked into organizations in almost every country in the world, and I can take away 25% of the stuff that they do within 2 hours, just because it's needless, non-value add stuff, right? That people cling on to. But even if I follow your logic, and you're really spending 18, 20 hours a day doing this stuff, and you're back to back with everything, look at the results. It's obviously not working. So stop doing it. Why continue doing something that's obviously not working?
George, I mentioned 1 million meetings happen a year across North America, I believe. That might even be a higher number. I'll have to check. But half of those meetings are unproductive. We don't need them, right? So right there, if you were to do an audit of your organization's meetings, the volumes of meetings that you attend or lead every week, I bet you that you could reduce at least 50% of the meetings that you have. And so right there, you've got time. You've found time. The other thing about doing things the way you've always done them and getting the results and not getting the results you want, let's take that now to learning and development. All right, leadership development. We rely on what I call tick box compliance-driven learning and development. We never really ask learners what they want to learn. We just give them a prescribed sense of programs and pathway, and we let them go. But I ask you as a business owner, how many organizations have you ever worked in that have audited how effective their learning and development investment is? So right there, you can save time, you can save money by understanding how much you're spending and how much time is being wasted on leadership development, learning and development that doesn't work for the people that are learning it. Again, replace that with a simple conversation. Ask the learner, what would you like to learn? Follow-up question, how would you like the learning to be evaluated? How would you like to be held accountable? What would make this better learning for you to do your job in a better way? All conversations like that start from the position of wanting to help the individual, and to the individual can help the organization. So I guess what I'm trying to say there is we've got these archaic got these archaic, they don't work anymore, processes and things in place. Now is a great time to clean house, to actually to audit what works and what doesn't work. And that, again, is going to save you so much time. You'll see so significantly and so easily how much time you can save.
Yeah, I completely agree. And also, it's a good moment to make those changes, because the changes are being forced on you anyway. So, you know, start using the technology. I mean, again, the simplest fix of any fix, right, is every organization on the planet that uses a scheduling calendar, whether it's Outlook or Google or whatever, right, they are hostages of the 30-minute on the 1 hour time slot, because that's the default, right? Make all your 1 hour meetings 50 minutes, right? So that nobody has an excuse for turning up late to the next meeting, right? And they can have a chance to have a bio break and have a chance to clear their mind and get their head straight for the next meeting. There are maybe, in my experience, 0.00005% of meetings where that extra 10%, that extra 10 minutes will make a difference, right? So make all your 1 hour meetings 50-minute meetings, and I've just solved 85% of your meeting problems.
Yeah, well, and even taking that one step further, I've worked with organizations where one leader set all of his meetings to start at 11 minutes past the hour. And so, like, a meeting that starts at 11 minutes past the hour, and for 15, 20 minutes, that's it. Like, none of this kind of like laborious, what's on the agenda. Like, you create a meeting that's a novel thing in itself, right? 11 minutes past the hour. You're not going to forget what time the meeting starts. That's quite novel. And then, I mean, I think it was Elon Musk who said, like, if you're not adding value to a meeting, then leave the meeting, right? So that's, you know, when I talk about disruptive talent and disruptive leadership, you've got to also create the culture where if you're in a meeting and it's not being valuable, then you have to encourage people to speak up and end the meeting, right? So another tool that I've used for effective meetings, it's by Edward de Bono. I don't know if so you're aware the six thinking hats.
The thinking hats, yeah.
The 6 thinking hats. So yeah. I've done this with leadership team meetings where I've gone around the room, right? So for those who don't know about the 6 thinking hats, the black hat, let's say, there's 6 hats, 6 different colors. The black hat is the hat where, when you have that hat on, you think about everything that's going to go wrong with something, right? So imagine, just using the black hat as an example, you go in and you're talking about, I don't know, should we diversify and launch a new product line? Okay, so let's just take 10 minutes or 5 minutes to brainstorm using the black hat about why that wouldn't be a good idea, why it wouldn't work. And then you go around the room and you get everybody's opinion with a black hat. You chart it down on your flip chart, whatever you do, and then you say, right, the green hat. So the green hat's transformation. How can this idea really our business? And you go through again, and you go through every one of the 6 hats, different colors. And I've seen that as a very practical tool help unify and align leadership teams very quickly. Yeah. And again, all it takes is a change of a mindset and seeing something through a different lens, because then what you're doing is you're getting everybody on the same page, and you're encouraging dissenting perspectives, but you're encouraging them at the appropriate time, which ultimately makes your meeting more productive and the outputs much more sustainable, because everybody's had a contribution to it. So there are so many different ways we can improve meetings. There's one argument that says get rid of meetings altogether. Like, why do you even need meetings? We're all grown up and adult and trustworthy. You come to us when you want to meet, but other than that, don't meet.
Yeah. So my 2 big things are always never ever meet to share information. It's a complete waste of time. It's ineffective. People learn and consume information in different ways. Give them the information that they need. You meet to come together, to brainstorm, to make decisions, to take stuff forward. You never ever meet to share information. But then, you know, the other thing that I always argue in business is, so how do you measure the effectiveness of your meeting? And, you know, again, 99.995% of meetings or companies, they look at you as if you've got three heads. It's like, what do you mean measure the effectiveness? So, if you're spending 65% of your day in meetings, surely you should be measuring whether or not that's effective time. And of course, nobody ever does. The meeting is just the meeting. And it's like, and we finished the meeting, and now we'll go to the next meeting. It's like, that makes no sense. Tell me whether or not it's effective.
Well, and imagine a system where you were tracking the outputs of the meeting, and how did they translate into tangible activities. And so you could have a direct line of sight to say, right, we're only going to talk about stuff that we can put into action. Because why meet for the sake of meeting? Why meet, North American culture might be different, but typically North America, people come to a meeting and they've already got their solution in place, but they just get to the meeting to discuss it. But then it's going to be the same outcome that they intended when they went in. So why have the meeting? It doesn't make any sense. Whereas the meeting for the meeting, the idea of a meeting is to get different opinions to help craft a solution. So again, I keep coming back to culture, because if your organization and your leadership in the organization do not share a similar viewpoint like that, then you will get this kind of like, it's like shifting deck chairs on the Titanic, right? The Titanic's still going to sink, but you're just spending your time shifting the deck chairs. Well, what about actually taking that whole concept away and asking ourselves, do we need to have meetings? And only have meetings if it contributes to our ability to get something done. And by the way, I've done a lot of work with strategic planning, and I've used one of Jim Collins' tools called the BHAG, which is the Big Hairy Audacious Goal concept. And so I've worked with leadership teams when they're doing strategic planning. And one of the things I always work with them on is saying, you've got all these different areas of focus, which then would translate, let's say 4, which translate into different projects that then get carried out and executed. But technically, if you're doing anything that falls outside that scope, why are you doing it? Because the idea is everything you do should align to one of these 4 objectives under your BHAG. And it's another litmus test for organizations and leaders out there is to say, everything we're doing in a meeting, how is it contributing to us delivering against our strategic plan and our big, hairy, audacious goals? Because if it's not, stop doing it. It's wasting time, it's wasting money, it's wasting resources. Yeah. Why do it?
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Paul, thank you ever so much. Thank you for coming and sharing your wisdom and experience. It's been fun. It's been enjoyable, and I've learned a ton as well. So thank you ever so much. I really appreciate it, and hopefully you will be back soon to share some more wisdom. And maybe just about the time when the book's launched, it'd be wonderful to hear the success of that and how you're helping all these other organizations to make a difference. Thank you ever so much for joining us.
George, thank you. It's been a real pleasure. Great to get this time with you.